early summer came in full light. The days were already long enough to feel like a dare. The diner stayed closed. The neon sign remained dark in the front window, not as a failure, not as a loss, just as a decision that had already been made and would not be revisited. Margaret kept the keys in her pocket anyway. Habit, a small weight against her thigh every time she moved, like proof that she still belonged to that door, even while she refused to open it. Behind the diner, the yard no longer looked like a place that had survived something. It looked like a place preparing. Tools lay out in clean lines on a makeshift workbench. A sawhorse held a stack of straight lumber. A coil of extension cord sat ready, looped and neat. Noah moved through it, all the way he moved through everything now, without waste. He did not talk the plan to death. He set it in motion. Jack was there before the air fully warmed, not dragged out, not called twice. He came out the side door and crossed the grass without hesitation, shoulders set, eyes already on the tape measure in Noah's hand. Noah handed it over like it was normal for a boy to take the numbers and hold them steady, like Jack belonged in the work. 8'4", Jack called. Noah marked it. Pencil to wood, quick line, no flourish. Jack watched the blade line up. He watched the hands that knew how to make a cut that didn't wander. Then he did it himself. The first morning, Margaret did not step outside with an apron. She stepped out with her hair tied back tight. Loose tendrils escaped anyway, curling at her temples from the heat. She took in the yard, the lumber, the chalk lane, the level, and the way Noah had already made space for her without making a show of it. He didn't ask what she could do. He just put a hammer in her hand like it belonged there. Oscar came next. He carried a small tin, an old coffee tin with a lid that didn't quite fit anymore. It clinked when he walked. Screws, nails, washers. He held it with both hands, careful like he was carrying something that mattered. Because he was. Noah glanced down at him. Set it there, buddy. Oscar did, placing it on the sawhorse like it was fragile. Then he stood very still, watching, waiting for the next thing. Margaret's throat tightened, not with sadness, not with grief, but with the strange, steady ache of seeing her boy included without being handled. Noah didn't pat his head. He didn't soften his voice. He gave him a job, and that was kindness in a language Oscar understood. The first boards went down with the sound of commitment. Sill plates anchored, corners squared, measurements called clean and sure. Jack held the end of the tape and didn't let it sag. Margaret braced a board while Noah sank the nail. Then she sank the next one herself. Her swing wasn't hesitant. It was tired, practiced, and determined. There was no diner bell, no coffee brewing in the background, just the sharp, steady music of building. By mid-morning, the first wall was framed flat on the ground, studs laid out like ribs, spacing precise. Noah checked it once. Jack checked it again, brow furrowed, wanting the numbers to match twice, not once. Margaret ran her palm along the line of studs, as if she could feel whether the wall would stand. Oscar hovered close, tin in hand, ready. Noah gave the cue. Ready. Hands slid under the frame. Boots dug into dirt. The wall rose in one clean motion. For a heartbeat it wobbled, just the brief, uncertain sway of a thing not yet held. Margaret's grip tightened. Jack's shoulders stiffened. Then Noah guided it into place with a calm that seemed to settle the wood itself. It stood, straight, real. From the road, it must have looked like nothing, just lumber and effort and heat. From where Margaret stood, it looked like the first time in a long time something was rising instead of collapsing. They did it again and again. Walls framed, lifted, braced. The yard filled with the simple geometry of a new shape. Oscar carried small pieces back and forth, blocking, short boards, boxes of fasteners. Each time he brought something and set it down where it belonged. He glanced up, checking faces, checking that he'd done it right. He beamed when Noah nodded without fuss. Jack moved faster by the second day. Not reckless, efficient. He learned how Noah staged the work, how the right tool was always close, how the next cut was already measured before the saw started. Noah did not waste daylight. He treated it like a resource that had to be used before it disappeared. Margaret learned too. She learned where she fit in the chain of tasks, where she could hold, brace, drive nails, carry, measure. She learned she could climb a ladder without fear taking her legs out from under her. She learned her hands could blister and keep working anyway. Community came in brief, practical bursts. A truck rolled in midweek and unloaded straight boards without comment. Pete appeared one morning, looked at the platform framing, and handed Noah a box of hardware like it was nothing. Someone else brought a ladder and left it leaning against the fence. Another neighbor showed up for an hour, lifted 2 walls, wiped sweat off his brow, and disappeared again. No one lingered. No one made speeches. They just helped and went back to their lives. Because this wasn't a spectacle. It was necessary. By the end of the week, the second-story deck went down. Joist set, subfloor laid. The moment it was solid underfoot, Jack climbed up first, testing the weight like he didn't trust anything until his boots proved it. He looked back down at Noah, then at Margaret, then at Oscar. Oscar stood below with the tin hugged to his chest, eyes wide, face lifted toward the new height like it was a treehouse made honest. Noah didn't invite him up yet, not because he didn't want him there, because Noah didn't do unnecessary risk. He built the risk out first, then he allowed the joy. Margaret kept a pencil tucked behind her ear, not because she was writing orders, because when the framing paused, only for a minute, only long enough to drink water, she would lift a small pad and sketch the layout again. Not the overall shape, the details. A window shifted a few inches for light. A door opening adjusted so the kitchen wouldn't feel trapped. A narrow hall widened so Oscar could move without catching his shoulder on corners. She didn't say those things out loud. She just drew them. And Noah, when she handed him the page, looked at it like it mattered, then made it happen. The roof came faster than anyone who hadn't watched Noah work would believe. Trusses arrived in the bright heat of a morning that already smelled like cut pine. They stacked them clean and ready. Noah didn't stand back and admire them. He started. Jack climbed with him, sure-footed, hands gripping wood like he belonged on a roofline. Margaret stayed at the ladder, steadying, handing up fasteners, calling out what Noah needed before he asked for it. Oscar stood below, with both hands tight on the tin, eyes tracking every movement. He didn't chatter. He didn't fidget. He watched, intent, like the whole world was a problem he could learn to solve if he just looked hard enough. "Ready," Noah said again, and the truss lifted. It rose, tipped into place, and settled as if the building itself had been waiting for it. The roof line began to take shape. Not a promise, a fact. Sheathing followed immediately. Panels hauled up, nailed down in quick rhythm. The sound changed when the roof started to close in overhead. The open air became contained. The harsh sun on the deck softened into shade. Roof underlayment rolled out tight and smooth, overlapped clean, and cap-nailed in place. Margaret could feel the moment it happened, not as emotion, not as relief, as physics, as protection. They set windows next, clear glass in new frames. The first time Margaret saw the light shift as it passed through glass instead of open sky. Something quiet in her chest loosened. Rap went up. A temporary door hung square. Noah tested the latch once, then moved on without ceremony, because it wasn't the latch that mattered. It was what the latch meant. By the time the sky darkened in the distance, the apartment was dried in. Not finished, not even close, but held. The first summer storm rolled in that afternoon, the way summer storms did, without threat, without warning sirens, without violence, just a steady soaker. The clouds gathered in soft gray layers. The light dimmed. The air cooled as if the world had exhaled. Rain began in a quiet sheet, tapping the new roof in a steady rhythm. Not pounding, not angry, just rain doing what rain had always done. Only now it couldn't get to them. They stood inside the unfinished second story. Stud walls exposed, raw subfloor beneath their feet. No insulation yet, no drywall, no trim. But the sound of rain above them was different than the sound it had been in the old house. There was no scramble, no frantic listening for the first drip, no buckets, no fear. Rain struck the roof and slid away. It beaded on the wrap outside the window and ran down in long, clear lines. Margaret stood at the glass and looked out. From up here, The diner sign was visible below dark, waiting. Beyond it, the newly cleared garden space lay in neat, straight rows. Freshly turned earth darkened quickly under the rain. String lines sagged slightly with the weight of water. The ground drank it like it had been thirsty. Jack leaned back against a stud wall, arms crossed, listening. Oscar pressed his palm to the window and watched the drops merge and fall, tracking one long rivulet as it made its slow way down the glass. Noah stood a step behind them, gaze moving from roofline to window to garden, as if taking stock of what they'd done and what it could now withstand. Someone spoke, not loud, not emotional, just practical. Good for the garden. Silence held for a beat. The rain kept falling. Then Margaret let out a breath that turned into a quiet laugh. Jack's mouth tugged, and he laughed too real, surprised, like the sound had been waiting somewhere in him. Noah's shoulders loosened, and the corner of his mouth lifted, the smallest shift that still changed the whole room. Oscar laughed because everyone else did. A beat behind, bright and full, and that was all right. The rain continued its steady song on the roof, and inside the unfinished second story, in full daylight, with the diner below and the garden drinking in the storm, they stood together and listened. Dry,